So, Happy New Year. Welcome to LiberalViewer First Wednesday Live Q&A, the live show I do on the first Wednesday of every month, answering questions from my viewers. So, if you're watching now live, you can post any questions you have in the old-style YouTube comment section that is during live events, and hopefully I'll get your comment in a few minutes. But first, as always, I like to start with the questions people posted before the show started, which I actually prefer because I think I can give much better answers if I have even just a few minutes to do some background research, especially on legal questions. And I get a lot of legal questions. Like the first question I got for my show this month from Bob Wilson, who asked on Monday what I think of the approval primary initiative in Oregon. Here, let me put that question up here. Asking, this will be like California's open primary, except it stops vote splitting by allowing voters to express an up or down opinion for each candidate, and the two candidates with the highest approval will face off in the general election. And then the question is, if this passes, do you think the ability for voters to vote their conscience without splitting the vote will help third parties or independents get elected? Do you think this will help elect real centrist candidates? And, you know, it's actually a really tough question because it's hard to predict how those kind of changes in voting are going to affect the outcome. I looked at the approval primary website. Here's like part of the explanation. And there's a link down, all the graphics I show, there should be a link down in the video description. And there's a link to the approval primary website, where basically at the primary level, you get to vote for everyone you like. You don't have to, you can choose any or all of them. And then the two highest vote getters, they are put up in the general election. And this is a little different from, in California, we have that, except you only vote for your favorite in the primary, but we have the two highest vote getters end up in the general election, and that sometimes has the outcome that in the general election you have two Republicans or two Democrats running against each other. If there were two Democrats or Republicans in the primary and it's a Democrat or Republican leaning district, then you could end up with two people of the same party in the general election, and then that actually does help move people to the center, because generally then the more centrist person is going to get more votes. And there are problems with this, what's called approval voting system. I looked at this Fair Voter website. They had this thing where they talked about how Dartmouth alumni got rid of their approval voting system. Now, this doesn't have a general election afterwards, but one of the things they pointed out, this is like down lower in the article, that if you just have approval voting without a general election afterwards, you can have the person who doesn't have a majority end up winning. Like if with just majority, where you vote for your favorite, you could have like 52% for Janet Garcia, 40% for Bill Jones, and 8% for Robin Hayes. But where people can vote for more than one candidate, it could be 54% for Garcia, 56% for Jones, and 18% for Hayes. So the person who would have won 52-40 now loses 56-54. And it's because there's this way to like game the system, especially like I said, this is if there's no general election afterwards, where you try to tell the voters for the other guy, we're a lot like you, so just vote for both of us. But then you try to tell your voters, just vote for our guy, because that's what you need to do to really get our guy elected. And so this whole like gaming of the system, and I don't know, and I wasn't really sure exactly what the questioner was saying when Bob Wilson asked, do you think this will help elect real centrist candidates? And I'm not sure if that meant that candidates who are more to the left, because the real center in the United States is a lot farther to the left than the center of the elected bodies. That's been moved pretty far to the right by some kind of extreme right-wing candidates over the last 10 or 20 years, I think. Or if that was trying to say that instead of having, we have this problem which has more to do with gerrymandering than anything else, that if because all the districts are safe districts, the people elected to Congress only care about whether they're conservative or liberal enough to avoid getting a primary challenge. And so that tends to make people in Congress more extreme. And I don't know if this approval voting system would change that or not. Like I said, it's kind of difficult to figure out how these things are going to work until you actually put them into practice, and then go through a few elections and see what happens. You can kind of try to game it out theoretically, but it's very difficult. So I don't know. That's the best I can do on that question. The second question I got asked beforehand that I want to address here comes from Terry Alther. And he's talking. I actually saw this video from the Young Turks about money in politics, where this chart will piss you off, and it talks about how the unemployment and money in politics. And I actually have been planning on making another video about campaign finance. There was a Young Turks video from several months ago about the McCutcheon decision. That's a current case before the Supreme Court that is some people are calling it Citizens United on steroids. And I actually got part way into making a video criticizing something that Cenk Uygur said when that was first argued. And that will happen sometime this year, sometime in the next 4, 5, 6 months. That's my plan, is to make another campaign finance video before the Supreme Court, or right around the time the Supreme Court makes its decision in the McCutcheon case. And I don't want to go into really big, long, boring details, but the McCutcheon decision is about it's a couple different issues. But as an example, one of the issues is there's a couple $1,000 limit on how much you can give to a candidate for Congress. And then there's an aggregate limit that says, I can't remember the actual numbers, but let's just say it's $100,000. So that means that you can't give more than, if you can only give $2,000 to each congressional candidate, and there's a $100,000 limit, that means you can only give to 50 candidates, and then you reach your personal aggregate limit. And the question is, if giving to $2,000 to 50 individual candidates isn't corrupting, why is giving $2,000 to that 51st congressional candidate, why is that corrupting? Because corruption is one of the only reasons under the First Amendment that the Supreme Court lets Congress pass laws that regulate campaign finance to avoid corruption or the appearance of corruption. So if the justification for this campaign finance regulation is to avoid the appearance of corruption, how does this aggregate limit that stops you from giving to the 51st congressional candidate, how does that avoid the appearance of corruption when you've already given to 50 other candidates? And that's kind of the issue. And I will be making hopefully one more video on campaign finance sometime before the Supreme Court, or around the time the Supreme Court decides McCutcheon. So I guess hopefully that answers this question. Wondering if you will eventually respond to the money equals corruption they bring up in these videos. So yes, the answer to that question is yes. I am planning on making another video about campaign finance and money equals corruption sometime before the Supreme Court decides the decision in the spring, or maybe when it decides the decision in the spring. Let me, before I go to the next question, let me just see what's going on. Looks like I've got a couple dozen people watching, which is good for a holiday. I'm glad to see that I have some live viewers, and I hope I'm giving you what you're hoping for. And I am going to get to the live questions in a few minutes after I go through a few more of these questions that people asked before I got started. I think I was up to this question. Oh, this person keeps asking me to say this word on a lot of my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup videos, and I don't know exactly why, but I will say SNEN. See, look, I said it. And that was one of the easiest questions to answer. So I will go on to the next question here. Imagine Peace 63 asks, or says, do a video on the Transpacific Partnership. And I actually have been thinking about, doing a video on the Transpacific Partnership for a long time. That it's not a law passed by Congress, but it's a treaty between nations that's going to have a lot of negative copyright effects. It's kind of like if anyone remembers the whole SOPA thing. I did make 1 or 2 videos on SOPA, which was a law that a lot of the big copyright holders tried to get passed through Congress that would have had really negative consequences for people who engage in fair use, and there were a lot of other problems with it. And so one of the problems with making that kind of video is it requires a lot of study on my part, because I don't like making videos on treaties or legislation unless I've actually read them. I remember a couple years back when I actually had to read the Affordable Care Act before I started making videos on that. That was a lot of investment, but I've made several videos on it. So I do think it's an important issue, so hopefully I will have a chance to read through it and become familiar enough with it so that I can make a video that gives some kind of insight worth me putting in my 2 cents. So let's see, this was the one I just did, right? Yeah, okay, so then next question here from Noel. This was on Twitter. What do you think about suspending contraception mandate of the Affordable Care Act for religious employers like Hobby Lobby and the Roman Catholic Church? Well, I actually have made a video back almost a year ago. I think it was February 2012. I got a little screenshot of it titled "Religion Must Cover Birth Control," and I put a link down to that down in the video description. And in that video, I talk a lot about the mandate for and how it affects religious employers, whether it's unconstitutional or not. And I'm actually planning on making another video on that subject because that's another case up before the Supreme Court. So sometime in the next, probably just the next month, because I also started on a video title that it's going to be called Obamacare Forces Corporate Abortions. I think that's what it's going to be called. Because this has been one of the things, whenever this comes up on Fox News, they always try to say that Plan B and the morning after pill are abortion pills, when they're no more abortion pills than any birth control pills are, because they actually stop fertilization. And some people say they stop implantation, but that is not quite the same thing as being an abortion pill. That's something like RU486, which actually causes an implanted embryo to abort. Anyway, there are a lot of interesting First Amendment issues about the employer mandate. If you watch my video from last February, I talk about the first exemption, and it's kind of a strict exemption that was in the original version of the regulations on Obamacare that only exempted basically churches themselves and not even things like Catholic charities. And I think that's actually the best way to do it. That's the way in the California law and several other states that's been upheld in the courts. And that's what I talk about in that video from last February, to have that sort of strict exemption. The more you make the exemption wider and wider to places like Hobby Lobby, which that's not the Catholic Church, that's just a private for-profit employer where they're saying their personal religious beliefs stop them from being able to get health insurance that includes contraception coverage, or what they say is abortion, just because it has the morning after pill or whatever that stops fertilization and may possibly stop implantation, like I was saying before. And the problem is these employers are saying that it's a First Amendment issue because it stops their free exercise of religion to require them to be complicit in this activity that they consider immoral. But there are two religion clauses in the First Amendment. The other is the Establishment Clause, and there's actually an Establishment Clause problem if you make the exemption too wide, because if you say that religious people don't have to abide by a law that people who aren't religious do have to abide by. That's giving a benefit to religious people, which and giving favoring religious people over non-religious people violates the Establishment Clause. This came up in conscientious objector statutes for people who were drafted, whether you could avoid military service as a conscientious objector, and I believe the court said that you couldn't just base it on religious belief. It had to apply to people who had sincere beliefs not based on religion, or it would be a violation of the Establishment Clause, because that's a much clearer case of letting people get out of military service if they're religious, but not if they're not religious. That would definitely be giving a benefit to religious people. So there's a really long, complicated issue involved in how narrow or wide the exemption for religious organizations or for religious beliefs in the contraception coverage. It also has to do with this statute, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that was passed by Congress, because when the Supreme Court looked at this issue in this case, Smith versus Employment Services, they basically said if a law applies to people generally, just happens to have a negative effect on your religion, that's not a violation of the First Amendment. And this was for people who I think they were American Indians, Native Americans who wanted to use peyote and got fired because of it, and so they wanted to get unemployment benefits, if I'm remembering the facts. And so basically it said your religious beliefs didn't let you use peyote without having a loss of federal benefits, because it was a law of general application. And that's basically, and so this law was passed by Congress to give more rights to religious people, but it hasn't really been tested, and hasn't been tested as to whether it violates the Establishment Clause, as I was discussing before. So anyway, it's a long, complicated issue that I'm planning on addressing in a video titled Obamacare Forces Corporate Abortions ? That I started work on a while ago, and hopefully I will finish before or around the time the Supreme Court actually gets to the issue. So Noel also posted another question for somebody else, Robert, and it was about this article in TechDirt. DOJ cracks suspect's hard drives, quickly drops request to force him to decrypt. And this article, excuse me, I'm taking a quick sip of water here. It talks about when you're arrested for some crime where the evidence is on your hard drive. Here's the actual question here from Noel. And you have to read it from the bottom. Will future cases not force defendants to give their password because with weakened NSA standards, prosecutors can decrypt most hard drives? So I guess I better explain the issue a little better before I get to the question. Basically, when the cops arrest you and they have evidence on your computer that they want to get to that's encrypted and you have the password, the question is, can they force you to give them the password, or does that violate your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination? Because these cases, the case there, it was like someone who had child pornography on their hard drive, and they were trying to get the defendant to give them the password so they could decrypt it. And courts have gone both ways on whether it violates the Fifth Amendment to require you to give up your password to the police so that they can find evidence to use against you, because the Fifth Amendment says you can't be required to testify against yourself. The question is whether, in that case, the prosecutors actually dropped their request because they didn't want the courts to decide whether it was a violation of the Fifth Amendment, because they cracked the code themselves without getting the password. And so what Robert was asking there through Noel was, will future cases not force defendants to give their password because with the weakened NSA standards, prosecutors can decrypt most hard drives? And I also want to show you this EFF case here about some of the Edward Snowden leaks showing that the NSA is working to undermine encrypted communications. And then it also gives some ways that you can fight back. And some of those ways to fight back involve getting legislation that reins in the NSA so they no longer do this. What they're talking about there is that the NSA has a lot of like the big commercial encryption services, they've like made them put in back doors, or they've done a lot of things to weaken encryption so that they can spy on people who think that their data is actually secure. I mean, I'm the answer to Robert's question there is like more of a technical question that maybe someone, I think Robert may know more about that stuff than I do, about how encryption can defeat these NSA backdoors and ways that they've weakened it. But I mean, I think that is the real answer. And if you look at that in that EFF article, and by the way, like I said, there are links down in the video description to all these things that I'm showing. In this EFF article, there's a link also to an article in The Guardian by this guy Bruce Schneer, who gives you a guide to staying secure despite what the NSA is doing. And he basically gives 5 tips that are down in the lower part of the article. I don't know how well you can see that. And some of this is like beyond my technical understanding of encryption. But like I said, I put a link to this whole article down below on these 5 things you can do technically. And that's beyond what's back in this EFF article talking about how we can actually fight to make sure that the NSA can't do this anymore. But hopefully that's the best way to deal with this question that Robert was asking, is to stop the weakening of encryption. And I mean, that's what I hopefully believe, that because I've always heard that the math is on the side of the encryptor, that it's a lot easier to encrypt things than to decrypt them. You get faster and faster computers, and the faster the computer is, the easier it is to use it to decrypt things. But the people who are encrypting them also have pretty fast computers, and the math is on their side, or at least that's my kind of meager understanding of the issue. But anyway, I hope that kind of answers the question, or at least addresses what the answer might be anyway. So I have one more question that I was asked before I started the show, and then I'll go down into the comment section and look for some live questions I might be able to answer. This was actually more of a comment. This was right before I started the show, or in the last couple hours. The Guitar Czar says, "I'm glad I saw this. I have not gotten one upload notice from YouTube for LiberalViewer, and I've been subscribed for a few years. YouTube's completely ruined the way we used to get videos on our homepage." Well, I mean, it's hard for me to disagree with that. I'm not all that happy with the way that YouTube distributes my videos compared to the way they used to do it in the old days. I mean, there are actually 2 parts to that. One is that the front page of YouTube, years ago, it used to have like the people who the videos that got the most, or got 5 stars. Back before it was thumbs up, it was like 5 stars or 4.5. The most stars and the most discussed, and so there were ways for having people who actually had engaged viewers to get their videos up on the front page of YouTube. And I got some videos that used to go viral that way, and I miss those days. But I can't fault YouTube for their company, that they control their front page, and rather than like feeling sour about not having that opportunity anymore, I'm just grateful for the years when my videos were able to occasionally get on the top of those lists and get more viewers. That I can't complain so much about. The other part about my, I have over 100,000 subscribers, and I hear from a lot of people that even though they're subscribed to me, they don't see my videos anymore. And that's a little, I'm more willing to criticize YouTube for, because they made this whole, they always encouraged us to increase our subscriber base, and that's a relationship I've created with each of the people who've subscribed to my channel. And for YouTube to make it harder for those people to see my videos, that doesn't really seem as fair to me as YouTube deciding to do a different thing with their front page in terms of not showing the top rated and most discussed and top favorited videos anymore, because that I think is more up to YouTube. So But I appreciate all the comments and questions people posted before I started the show. Like I said, when I have a chance to think or do a little research, I think I can do a better job of answering questions, and I think I'm going to prove that now because I'm going to try to look at the comment section and see I have almost 50 people watching, which is nice on New Year's Day here. Why is it? It keeps like signing me out here. So yeah, let me look through here and see if I can see anything I can answer. Pat's Rules 213 regarding that guitars are says not true. I subscribed last year and have gotten all the live feeds. Well, I think one of the weird things is the live feeds show up in a way that the old YouTube videos used to, instead of like the new way. There are a lot of things about live events that work the old way. If you're here commenting on the live event, you'll notice you don't have to have a Google Plus account, and it's not in the Google Plus format. Although once it becomes a recorded video, then it is going to be in the new comment. There was like actually a few week lag where my live events didn't have the new YouTube comment system, but now when it becomes recorded, they do. But I do think that maybe you can see the live events when you don't see the recorded videos or the edited produced videos. And I see you're discussing that back in. NO8549 says open primary in California has been bad for the Green Party. Well, I mean, that's the thing. This is different from Oregon, but the open primary in California, it used to be that every party got to have their own primary, and then their candidates would also be on the ballot in the general election. But with this open primary system, now the third party candidates, they don't get on the ballot for the general election. They're only on the ballot in the primary. It's going to be only the Democrat and the Republican most of the time, and sometimes two Democrats or two Republicans who end up on the general election ballot. And so actually, while they have a better chance theoretically to be in the top two from the primary system, they have a much worse chance of showing up on the general election ballot. But that's the California system. Like I said, the Oregon system is different, and it's I don't know exactly how that's gonna turn out. Let's see. Jan Etor says, yeah, campaign finance. I do notice that mentioned in the Young Turks. Yeah, well, the Young Turks has set up this whole wolf pack thing, and they want to get a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, and that I'm very, very skeptical about. And I'm hoping to make a video about that when I make this McCutcheon video. And one of the things that disturbs me about that is you never get to see any definite text of how they're going to amend the First Amendment, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to amend the First Amendment, which that's what makes me worried. I have a strong belief in a lot of the hard-won First Amendment freedoms. It's only in the last 90, 100 years that the Supreme Court has started striking down laws for violating the First Amendment. And there's a lot of good case law that's been built up over the years, and who knows what's going to happen to that if we amend the First Amendment and make changes. And I just haven't seen good language that doesn't have some huge flaw in it when you think about it. So anyway, let me see if I think I'm just about at 30 minutes, and I can't really stand listening to myself talk for much more than 30 minutes. But I will see if I can find one or two. They're talking about whether I should run for president as a third-party candidate. Well, I don't know. I don't think that I would be that electable, but I'm not sure that that's where my strengths lie as a politician. I think I'm better as a critic than as someone who's out there trying to convince people to, trying to build coalitions and, I don't know, politicians generally, it's hard to be a truth teller and also be a politician. You kind of have to convince people to go your way when they really shouldn't, if they really knew all the facts. I don't know. But I guess I was a criminal defense attorney for several years, so but I always just, then I tried to find some way to believe in what I was trying to convince the jury to believe. So anyway, Gabor Kosper says, I thought it's regulated how good encryption you can legally use in the US so that the FBI can crack it easily. Well, if you read the EFF article that I was referring to earlier, I think it was in there, they actually go into the history, and maybe it was a different article I looked at beforehand, but they actually go into the history of encryption, and there was like an attempt, what was it called, the Clipper chip, where they were, they tried to put in these backdoors into back in the 90s, and Congress voted it down, and they tried to change the regulations, and it didn't. That was all, what is it, the national standards, I can't remember the exact name of the group that creates the encryption standard, and that was also beaten back by privacy advocates. And the really sad thing about it is that even though the NSA basically lost in the courts, and they lost in the Congress, and they lost in the regulations, then they just secretly went and did it anyway. So it's not so much that, I mean, it is regulated, but it was supposed to be regulated so that government couldn't weaken the encryption, but it turns out the NSA did do it. So we have to fight that either by finding encryption that the NSA hasn't weakened, or getting Congress and the executive to rein in the NSA from no longer weakening the encryption. But anyway, I think that that's about all the time I have for my Liberal Viewer First Wednesday Live Q&A for this New Year's Day, January 1st, 2014. I hope you all had a good New Year's Eve, and you're going to have a Happy New Year. As I said last Sunday, I'm working on a video. It should be done in the next 24 hours on this lie of the year, where Obama's saying if you like your plan, your healthcare plan, you can keep it. That was the lie of the year from PolitiFact, and it got a little more complicated than I expected. It's actually got like 3 different ways that I'm criticizing it being the lie of the year, but I'm about 2/3 of the way done with that. That should be up, I think, by the end of the day tomorrow. So look for that, and I should have, of course, there'll be Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and then you can join me the first Wednesday of every month at 4:30 p.m. Pacific for my live Q&A. I appreciate all of you. I think I had over 50 people at some point, so that's encouraging. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for all the great questions, and enjoy the rest of your New Year's, and I'll see you around the internet. Okay, Sandy, that's it.